Welcome back to Property Playbook. We're your hosts, Elena Saradidis
and Erica Reddy-Choquette.
And today we're talking about curb appeal. Does it matter when selling your home in any market?
I like it. So I didn't know the topic, so I was kind of on the edge of my seat. What are we going to talk about? So I'm glad I can talk about curb appeal. I'm just kidding. But curb appeal, I think, is actually a really interesting piece of conversation because the number of times I find that clients are like, the curb appeal, the curb appeal, the curb appeal. When can we sell to have the best curb appeal? And curb appeal is a real thing. And I mean, in a beautiful summer market, you can typically have the nicest curb appeal possible, but we don't always have optimal, summer weather when selling homes. So curb appeal is one of those things that you got to really work with in all the different seasons and all the different, times of sale.
I would agree. And the reason why curb appeal does play a big factor is because the majority of the conversations about the property take place on the driveway.
Yeah, driveway, front of the house. I mean, so one of my biggest tips for curb appeal that I say to people all the time is the minute your property goes live on the market for sale, the lights are never being turned off. And a bit to your point is people are going to drive by that house multiple times during the day, multiple times during the night. They're probably going to get a coffee. They might throw their kid in the stroller. They're going to walk by it. You want that house to be like a beacon or a lighthouse or something that has them standing there being like, wow, look at this property and look at how it shows. Where if it's dark and you can't see anything and it doesn't have the curb appeal and it doesn't allow for that kind of continued conversation, dialogue, and emotions to keep running after somebody's seen the house.
So like external paint for the front, if it needs it, do it. People stand there and look at the house way too much. If it like has snow or has leaves, clean it up.
Yeah.
People stand in front of the house. And to your point, they will walk by the house multiple times. They will take bike rides. They will take their car. They will listen to what the neighbors are saying. Don't think they won't. They will.
They'll also send family by. Like they will be looking at that house more times than you would ever know. And they want to see it from morning to night. And you want it to show its absolute best. So I think lights on for sure. Number one tip. To your point, removing snow, sweeping leaves, etc. I always say keep the driveway clear so that you can pull in and park easily if it's got a driveway. And then I think it's tiny but makes the world of a difference is planters and a fresh doormat. Because that first impression when you're kind of, agent is getting key out of lockbox and you're standing there, if you've got this beautiful welcoming porch, it makes such a difference to the overall feel.
I agree. So the one thing about curb appeal that we didn't kind of touch on yet, and this is comes back to one of our other episodes, and I think it's launching next week.
Okay.
The house, on average, will have a Ring doorbell on it. Keep that in mind. So when you're talking about the house in front of the property, there's a very high likelihood that someone else is listening.
Yes. I think that's really important because the number of times that I have sellers calling me with the information that was captured on a doorbell is more times than probably anybody realizes. And at times it's, something that they don't like. So it gets the seller really stressed and worried. Other times it has nothing to do with anything. So you're fine. And sometimes it's like talking about price or these kinds of things. And if you're with your buyer's agent, that's the information that you want to be, concealing safely with your agent and not talking, kind of ad lib about on the porch.
Well, for example, if you're talking on the porch and saying, you know what, we're going to start here, but we'll end here. Now we know where you're going to end. Guess what?
Yeah.
They're going to call the agent and be like, they said they could pay up to this amount.
100%.
Don't even listen to their first number. Let's get them higher than that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, one of the other things too, kind of on curb appeal, and this is where you can do this seasonally, whether it's a blizzard and minus 30 or, plus 30 and the biggest heat wave is you can have the fresh flowers, you can have the fresh doormat, you can, have the steps shoveled. You always, you cannot underestimate how that feels when you first approach. Another tip that I also love that I've used quite a few times, and maybe you've done it too, is a tension rod and some fabric, depending on what your view is like, on either side of you. That can just really create a lovely ambiance and kind of take the eye line away from the other properties if you need to or want to, for very little money. So I don't think curb appeal should be the kind of thing that people freak out about in the sense of needing to spend a fortune on, but very much understand how important it is. And that also has me segue into the backyard, because I would argue that the backyard is as important as the front yard. And it's kind of the second curb appeal of the property, because you finish there, right? You start at the front, you walk through, and then you typically end up in the backyard before you leave the property.
I think you're spending a lot more time in the front. I really do.
I don't disagree.
Like you're gonna take a peek. There's different weather. Sometimes you're gonna go to the backyard. Sometimes you're not. But the front of the house, you're getting into your car. You're getting out of your car. You're waiting for your agent at the lockbox. Then you finished up your showing. You're waiting at the front again. So, yes, the backyard needs to look clean and ready to go. And like sometimes that is like doing maintenance on the back. Like do it. It's very. And the cost of money spent, especially on exterior readiness, is not that much.
No.
Like we're not talking about $1,000. Like it could be under that and you could get the whole entire front and the whole entire back ready. But don't cheap out on stuff like that because people pay attention and the more they drive up to the property, they're going to remember.
Yeah.
And like, this sounds bad again, but trust your agent when they tell you certain colors for certain things.
Yes.
Like I've had clients that they've had the house painted a certain color and I was like, listen, we've got to change it.
Yep.
Because it won't sell at the current state.
No.
So we need to change the color of the paint, like the walls. There's also another cheap but really effective thing that you can do if you have like an older home, but it's brick. If you have a brick older home and you have white windows, paint the exterior window frames black.
Oh, I mean, you're preaching to the choir when it comes to black paint. I am like the queen of black paint and white paint, right? White for the interior, black for the trim. It's clean. It makes it pop. It's just a lovely accent and it complements brick to your point so well. I've got my favorite whites and blacks. I know you do. So, I mean, we are always a wealth of knowledge willing to share. So we will, anyone that wants to know, we will absolutely drop those to them. But I think that is so important. And to your point on the backyard, yes, I don't think you need to get crazy. But this is also where like mulch can be your best friend. Doesn't cost a lot. Couple bags. Black is what made me think of this. A black mulch. And it just freshens everything up. So you have the black trim. You've got the black planters. You've got nice flowers. You've got black mulch. It's clean. It's fresh. It pops. And it really enhances the property.
Yeah, it ties everything back together. But again, we're going back to the same. So if you are looking to sell your property, curb appeal does matter. What you should be taking into consideration is, does the exterior look freshly painted? Does it need a fresh coat of paint? Do you need to do like a hidden little trick, like painting the windows on the outside? Should you add fresh planters? And the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
Some greenery or something that's inviting and home welcoming is great. Like a fresh new doormat.
Yeah.
It's a great little thing that you could do, but I can't stress paint enough. Number one, even if you forget everything else, make sure it looks clean and ready to go, because if paint's chipping, people notice and they think from the exterior, oh, they haven't taken care of the internal.
100%. And listen, nobody wants to, I think finding trades can be daunting enough, let alone sometimes finding trades for exterior work. And so you never want the first impression to be like, oh my gosh, and the laundry list of what I need to do to the exterior of the house is long. That's not a selling feature. The other thing that I was going to mention is, if you're thinking about selling, because let's be honest, most people start thinking about their next move 3 to 6 months before they engage a real estate agent. So that's a lot of time. Think about your property, when you're thinking about when you want to sell it, because it might be the middle of summer right now when you're having these thoughts. So capture the curb appeal of it in the summer, because it's always lovely to have the ability to show a prospective buyer, hey, here's actually what the front gardens look like, or here's actually what the property looks like in the peak of summer with all the beautiful ferns and mulch and the things that we've been talking about. So, if it is the middle of the winter, don't panic. The house is still absolutely going to sell, but to give people the perspective of like, hey, these are all the annuals and perennials. I think that's what the flowers are called. I don't have a green thumb. But
God.
Like, here's what
Erica's hiring people for that. She's not doing it herself.
100%. But here's what it's going to look like when all of those flowers are in bloom. And here's what you can expect to, see in the spring and in the summer and as it transitions into the fall and when the leaves change. So be mindful of when you're going to sell and be mindful of stockpiling all that kind of content so that it can be part of the listing.
And having pictures like that in the actual home.
Yes.
So when they're looking at the backyard, they're like, wait, this is what it looks like in the summer, in the fall, in the whatever. It helps. And I've had people that have made fantastic gardens and they're like, well, it's not really the best time for my garden. And I'm like, do you have a photo of your garden from when it was the best time?
Absolutely.
And they're like, yes. I'm like, I'm going to blow up the photo.
Yeah.
And I'll get a really big photo and I'll put it on the kitchen island because that's the steps away from the exit and people will look at it before they go out. And they love that.
Totally. And if you're listening and you go, listen, I don't have a home, so this curb appeal stuff does not actually, resonate with me. Yes, if you have a condo, the same applies to your balcony. Because for anybody looking at a condo, the balcony is kind of like the curb appeal in its own right and in its own way, because it's an extension of the living space. And so I think it's really important to look at that through the same lens that we've talked about. I mean, there are slats, those like square patio slats that you can throw down on the balcony that just massively transform like an ugly piece of concrete slab into like a lovely inviting space. And same thing, planters, I mean, a little umbrella, whatever obviously is within the condo regs, you know, the little twinkle lights, like you can do so much to have that space be so inviting or just kind of feel neglected and forgotten about.
And the other thing, and we didn't touch on this, your curb appeal in both condos and in a house doesn't, like, it's not that it doesn't matter as much, but your neighbors also matter. Mm-hmm. So like if you're driving by and we're looking at this house, it could be the most amazing house in the world, and the neighbor of the house doesn't look right,
yeah,
buyers will be turned off by your home.
Yeah.
And it could be you've done nothing wrong. Like I showed a house the other day, and let me tell you, the house was fine. There was nothing wrong with the house. But the moment we got outside and we walked down the street, because I always do this with my buyers, I'm like, let's walk around the block. Let's figure out the neighborhood. Across the street, there was like a little sketchy little house happening. And the moment the buyers saw that, they were turned off the property.
And the really hard part about living next to a hoarder or something like that is it's really kind of out of your control. And so this is where I even say like my curtain kind of tactic and technique I love, because sometimes, to your point, the next door neighbor maybe isn't the prettiest house. It's not a hoarder's house per se, but if you can just show a buyer that, hey, you can just kind of take your line of sight off that, don't lose sight of how amazing the actual house is, and don't lose any sleep about that, because to your point, it's the tiniest of things that can have people go from literally wanting to put an offer in before they've even left the house to getting a feeling that just completely changes their outlook on what they were planning to do.
And it's not just that, it's not just the neighbors, it's also what's going on in the area. Like areas that have, for example, libraries. Sometimes it's so cute to have a library in your neighborhood, but also sometimes it brings a little bit of the riffraff into the area. Mm-hmm. And it's not great. And if you walk by at certain hours, you'll see it. If, for example, like there's a homeless shelter, safe injection site, like guess what? We live in Toronto.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
But curb appeal of the neighborhood to walk by and see it could turn off a buyer.
Yep.
So there is some stuff that are out of your control.
Yes.
The main thing to focus on, though, is what is in your control.
Oh, absolutely.
Control your own home. If, for example, and I've done this in the past with my own properties, if I'm doing work to my house, I will offer it to my neighbor.
Yeah.
And I will offer it in a way that, like, you know, it's good to have a good neighbor, but also if I'm doing something small, like I'm painting my garage, can I paint your garage too? Like, do you want me to?
Sure, 100%.
You'll be like, yeah, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So then I control it.
Yeah.
So I paint it what I want it painted because I look out my window and I see it.
Yeah.
So like, it's not like, you know, I'm the bad neighbor that wants to change the whole neighborhood. No, but if I'm going to do it for my house and it's a small thing and it will
100%.
help increase the whole neighborhood, why wouldn't I do it for them too? They're right next to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and then I look like the greatest neighbor in the world.
Yeah.
Like I'm the one taking care of everyone. Like
I mean, listen, there's only so much in your control, and what you can control and what people are willing to allow you to control is great, frankly. Like, to your point, if you're going to look out and see something and you can have it look nicer and they're happy to have you painted and maintain it, I mean, that's a win-win on all fronts.
Guys, my neighbors love me. Like,
I
they
apparently
love
need
me.
to become your neighbor.
Come, be my neighbor. But the first thing I did when I moved in was I painted my garage. And when I painted my garage, I turned to them and I said, hey, listen, like, would you like me to paint your garage too? And they were like, sure. Like, you just want to paint our garage? I'm like, yeah, I'm painting mine. I might as well. It's the same. Like, we'll just run it through.
Yeah.
And we did it. They did want their planters a different color. And what was I going to say no to, like, the 90-year-olds that live next door? Of course not. I let them paint whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. It's fresh. They take care of my garden too. That's how much they water our plants as well. Like, we have really good neighbor relationships because we've done stuff like that.
Well, I think people forget sometimes when you're living in a house day in and day out, you're not spending the amount of time outside of the house that the prospective buyer is. So you actually lose sight, rightly so sometimes, of the maintenance and all the things you need to do on the outside. And let's be honest, who gets super excited about, say, spending money on painting windows, even though you should be painting windows and doing regular maintenance to your property? So it is that fact check of, okay, what do we need to do? Because now we need to flip into a different role, and that role of what are they looking and what lens are they looking at our house through versus the lens that we're looking at our house through is so important when it comes to getting ready for sale.
Also, keep in mind, buyers are nosy, rightfully so. We're spending a lot of money on these properties. If the neighbors come out and we're standing outside, and this happens the exact same way in condo buildings, because I'm that person, and I'll be like, how do you like living here? What do you have to say?
Oh.
Like, and if the neighbor is, not the greatest neighbor, they're not going to help your sale. But if the neighbor is fantastic and they know the whole area, they can actually help you get more money. Like, the condo building, whoever they stopped, security guards. Do you know how much of a role security guards play?
Oh.
Like, that is curb appeal.
100%.
Like, if your security guard is happy and friendly when you walk in, and the moment you're like, we're going to see 208, they're going to be like, oh my God, I love them.
Yeah.
It already sets the tone that we're going to really like this property.
And these
it
are all
helps.
things that are within your control, because if you're going to be selling, you can go to your immediate neighbors and say, hey, listen, I'm putting it up for sale. Drop off, a nice little bag of cookies or something. And just, is there anything I can do? There might be a little bit more increased foot traffic or street traffic, or just, if you're seeing a kind of car creeping along, it's for us because we're on the market, and prep them. And then, to your point, if an agent's leaving the house and going, oh, hey, they're going to be like, oh yeah, they're great. Or we're going to be sad to see them go. Or we've loved having them here in the house. Right? And it's just all about that feeling that you get, because the house is going to give you a feeling, or the condo is going to give you a feeling. And then in addition to that, obviously the atmosphere that kind of comes with it. I mean, I always say to people, like, when you're buying a house, it's a feeling. Like, if you wake up the next morning and you're still thinking about it, then that's the one. If it's out of your mind, forget it. And so you want to play into the emotions and play into the feelings. Absolutely.
And if they are still thinking about it, there's an 100% chance that they're going to drive by the property again.
Yes.
So the exterior of the property, in that sense, because they're not walking in, needs to be really nice.
Yeah.
Once again, it's Elena Saradidis.
And Erica Reddy-Choquette.
And today you listen to Property Playbook. If you like content like this, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe.